So this is an open event which will be viewed by Russian sinological community, by students and professors from Higher School of Economics, and by people from our bank, our development corporation, WEVRF, which is, for those who doesn't know, is something like China Development Bank in China. And it's the second time when we speak to Mr. Yuy Pinьхай, and the third time that I personally talked to Mr. Lin. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to do that. And before we start, I would like to make some housekeeping announcements. First of all, we have a translation here. So if you want to have a Russian translation, if you want to have all translated into Russian, then you can choose it in the right corner.
Линь Ифу.
Right corner of the screen. There is a button, translation. You can press it, and then you can choose between Russian and English. And I'll briefly switch to Russian to say the same in Russian. Коллеги, кто хочет слушать перевод, в правом нижнем углу есть кнопка «Перевод». Вы нажимаете на нее и выбираете тот канал, который вам нужен, русский или английский. Окей, хорошо. Then I'll switch back to English, and I would like to introduce my co-host today. It is Andrei Niyazovich Korneev, the head of School of Asian Studies. Yeah, the School of Asian Studies, who will be my co-host today. Andrei Niyazovich.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Andrei Korneev. I am head of School of Asian Studies of Faculty of World Economic and International Politics of our university. I'm also happy to greet distinguished speakers, Professor Lynn Ifu from Peking University Institute of New Structural Economics, and Chairman Yuy Pinьхai from Douyi Xinwen Media Corporation. Professor Lin is not a newcomer to Russia. He has actually visited our university 5 or 6 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And 2 years ago, he was participating in an event hosted by Moscow State University. And also his books were translated into Russian.
Также были переведены на русский язык. И он достаточно хорошо известен российской аудитории. Но это особое мероприятие, когда мы являемся...
Between the number one and number two economies, the United States and China are locked in this difficult relationship, but we all envisage that during the 14th year plan, by the year 2026, I think Chinese economy will be close to close the gap between the number one and number two. And if this happens, it will be extraordinary event for the not only for the current period, but for the probably for the last 500 years. Because all know that 500 years ago, Chinese economy was number one in the world. So I think that we will witness very special period of time for the foreseeable 5 years. And we are happy to ask Professor Lin and Chairman Yuy to share their thoughts on this very special moment in history. So I will not stand between you and the extraordinary lecture by Professor Lin and Chairman Yuy. And I will ask them to please tell us what is the special significance of this 5-year plan that is ahead of us. And we also have some questions that we will address the speakers after some thoughts that will be shared with us. So let me give the floor to a distinguished speaker, Professor Justin Lynn Ifu. Please.
Well, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And it's an honor for me to join the colleagues in Russia, together with Chairman Yu.
Мне побывать в России вместе с нашим лидером и обсуждать вопросы будущего роста Китая в предстоящие годы. Как вы упомянули, китайское правительство приняло 14-й пятилетний план и поставила цели долгосрочного развития. Этот план был утвержден на 2 сессиях парламента. В ходе этого 14-го пятилетнего плана поставлены долгосрочные цели развития. Одна из этих целей вызывает наибольшее внимание. Это потенциал роста и ориентировочные показатели роста Китая. Это очень важно, поскольку наш президент не только сделал предложение, он есть и цель уже в уме. Он надеется, что ВВП Китая может быть удвоен на основании к 2035 году в сравнении с 2020. Это одна из основных долгосрочных целей. Для достижения ее Китаю необходимо расти темпами, наращивать свой ВВП 4,7% в год в период между 2020 и 2035 годом. И в отличие от предыдущих пятилетних планов, в этот раз Китай не
Instead, the plan only mentioned China will set a reasonable growth interval each year during the 2 sessions in March. And the reason why China did not explicitly set the growth target.
Почему же эти цели были не выражены в точных цифрах? Дело в том, что вызывает озабоченность, неопределенность общего состояния мировой экономики, в частности, под влиянием пандемии ковида. Хотя уже Китаю удалось сдержать рост пандемии, в других странах, возможно, это не получится достаточно быстро. Поэтому это может повлиять на темпы роста не только других стран, но и самого Китая. Кроме этого, еще один фактор, который вызывает озабоченность, это возможный финансовый кризис, напоминающий тот, который случился в 2008-2009 году. Дело в том, что денежное предложение в США и в Европе вызывает озабоченность, равно как и пузырь на рынке акций. И, как и все пузыри, он лопнет рано или поздно. И опять-таки, возможно повторение кризиса, подобного 2008-2009 году. И, наконец-таки, еще один фактор, последний, но не по значению, это соревнование между экономикой номер 1 США и экономикой номер 2 Китая. Это тоже будет иметь свои последствия для темпов экономического роста в Китае. Смотрите, Сможем ли мы достичь вот этих ожидаемых средних темпов 4,7% в год? Это в большой степени зависит от общего потенциала роста китайской экономики, а также от того, выберет ли Китай правильную политику для того, чтобы раскрыть этот потенциал. Что касается потенциала роста, есть и факторы, связанные с глобальным сообществом. В течение последних 42 лет Китаю удавалось в среднем достичь 9% роста. Это произошло в период перехода от социалистической экономики к рыночной. И действительно, таких темпов роста мы не наблюдали ни в одной иной стране. И этот период бурного роста продолжался так долго. Утверждают, что это ненормальная ситуация. И в одной из известных статей было написано, что неизбежно Китаю придется сократить темп роста. Что это означает? Обычный темп роста. То есть 3-3,5% в год, как в других странах. И Китай неизбежно придет к нормальным темпам роста. Есть и другие люди, утверждающие, что не сумеет Китай поддерживать такие темпы роста. Дело в том, что высокие темпы роста связаны с демографической ситуацией Китая. Поскольку демографический рост в Китае замедлился, замедлится и экономический рост. Я полагаю, что такая страна, как Китай, может расти достаточно быстрыми темпами. Почему? У нас есть преимущество. Китай по-прежнему отстает в плане роста на душу населения. Мы по-прежнему в роли догоняющих. Если мы посмотрим на другие страны, в том числе европейские, самым важным являются технологические инновации. А бедные, развивающиеся страны, они находятся на этапе погони, скажем, они догоняют высокоразвитые страны. Они используют импортные технологии, получают их по лицензии и от передовых стран, и таким образом развивающиеся страны могут расти гораздо более высокими темпами, чем развитые страны. Это, мне кажется, одна из причин, по которой Китаю удавалось поддерживать на протяжении 42 лет темпы роста в среднем 9,2%. Далее, насколько вероятно вот эта модель роста сохранится в Китае, насколько она будет реалистична? Насколько велико преимущество отстающего у Китая, которым он до сих пор пользуется? Я могу ответить, что лучший способ ликвидировать разрыв в уровне доходов на душу населения между Китаем и другими странами. В 2019 году, то есть это самые последние данные, которыми я располагаю, ВВП на душу населения в Китае 22,6% от ВВП на душу населения в США в том же 2019 году. Возьмем Германию. Это похоже на тот уровень, который был в 1946 году в Германии, когда ВВП послевоенной Германии составлял 22% от ВВП на душу населения в США. Такая же ситуация была в 1956 году в Японии. Или же в Южной Корее в 1985 году. Вот этот разрыв в ВВП на душу населения, который обеспечивает преимущество опаздывающим и поздно пришедшим. В Германии темпы роста очень долго составляют 9%. В Японии 16% были темпы роста 9,6% ВВП. В Южной Корее 9%. Темпы роста составляют тоже в 16 лет. По этому опыту я могу сказать, что поздно пришедшие имеют преимущество. У Китая должен быть потенциал для непрерывного высокого темпа роста в течение многих лет. То есть на ближайшие 16 лет, с 19 по 35 год. Конечно, Китай должна учитывать и те проблемы, которые связаны с этим. Германия в 1946 году и до 1962 года в течение 16 лет темпы роста составляли 0,8% в год. В Японии темпы роста составляли в этот период в течение 16 лет 1% роста всего. В Корее же 0,9% прирост населения в год на те же 16 лет. Сейчас темпы роста населения в Китае составляют 0,3% в год. И вполне к 30 году темпы роста прироста населения могут снизиться до нуля. Это может быть одной из проблем. Я утверждаю, мы можем иметь до 1935 года 8% роста.
Because China need to take account the issue of climate change. The Chinese government committed to peak the carbon emission by the time of 2030 and to have the carbon neutral by the time of 2060. That means China need to adopt the growth technology in the process of its development. And there's some cost for that, and that will reduce the real growth. But at the same time, certainly China also need to face the challenge of decoupling with the US, because US embargo high technology and so on to China. But I'd like to say, although the US may have the intention to form an alliance to contend or to decouple from China, however, other high-income countries, other advanced countries like Germany, like Japan, like Korea, they enjoy the cooperation with China because China currently has the largest single market. And I will argue the growth in China will contribute to 20%, 30% in the world. So any country, if they concern their own growth, they cannot neglect the Chinese market. So by that, even the US has the intention to decouple from China, but I think only those kind of technology. The US is the only one country which owns the kind of technology. Then the US may be able to decouple from China. But other technology, as long as other countries also own those kind of technology, China should have the ability to get access to those kind of technology. So by that, I think the impact on the growth in China certainly will be there, but I don't think that will be large. So overall, unless in the coming years, there are some kind of natural calamity, like COVID-19 or others, or there's some global financial crisis, like the one we encountered in 2008, 2009. Other than that, I'm quite confident China should be able to grow around 6% per year in the coming 15 years between 2021 and 2035, and achieve the growth target set up by President Xi Jinping, because to achieve the growth target, there will be about 4.7%. And if China achieve that growth target,
Вот это вот валовый показатель может быть достигнут в 2025 году. ВВП на душу населения перейдет порог 10 535 долларов США. И Китай станет страной с высоким уровнем дохода. Это имеет историческое значение для нас. Только 18% населения земного шара живет в странах с высоким уровнем дохода. Как только Китай станет такой страной, численность населения в странах с высоким уровнем дохода удвоится, поскольку население Китая составляет существенную часть населения земного шара. Также, если Китай будет поддерживать темпы роста порядка 6% в ближайшие годы, тогда мы где-то в 30-х годах обгоним США, исходя из основных показателей. Китай уже по некоторым показателям обогнал США. И к 30-му году Китай обгонит США и может стать крупнейшей экономикой в мире, исходя из рыночного обменного курса. К 1935 году ВВП Китая удвоится в сравнении с 2020 годом. Но возможны шоки типа COVID-19 или другие внешние факторы. Например, финансовый кризис, равный по масштабу кризису 2008-2009 года. Тогда, естественно, темпы роста в Китае замедлятся. Даже при условии таких шоков, я думаю, что к 1935 году Китай, тем не менее, станет страной с высоким уровнем дохода на душу населения. Для того, чтобы преодолеть показатель дохода на уровень населения. Поскольку для того, чтобы выйти на такой уровень, нам нужно расти всего с темпами 3% в год. Я не могу себе представить такой сценарий, когда мы бы не смогли расти быстрее, чем 3% в год. Также Китай обгонит США к 30 году, потому что, поскольку если в мире будет экономический шок, и темпы экономического роста замедлятся, но они замедлятся и в США. Да. А падение в США будет гораздо резче, чем в Китае. Возьмите 2008-2009 год, когда США пострадали от финансового кризиса, а в Китае-то темпы роста сохранялись на уровне 9,4 при отрицательных 2,3 в США. Китай является единственной крупной экономикой, сохраняющей темпы роста при любых условиях. А в США эти темпы были и минус 3,5% в недавние годы. Я уверен, что к 30-му году Соединенные Штаты и станет крупнейшей экономикой в мире по показателю рыночного обменного курса. В предстоящем 14-летнем плане и с учетом целей, поставленных на период до 1935 года, это весьма важный период, решающий период для Китая. Это позволит Китаю вновь занять свое историческое место как крупнейшей экономики в мире. И, конечно, глобальная экономическая карта поменяется. Промышленная революция, западная мощь доминировала в мировой экономике. А теперь Китай выйдет на первый план, и Китай станет драйвером мирового роста экономики. Китай также будет играть и роль стабилизирующего фактора
Китай
мировой
стабилизирует глобальный
экономики,
рост.
поскольку в этот период роста
Сейчас должно быть лучше слышно.
Китай будет сохранять свои позиции в мировой экономике, и рост Китая послужит на благо не только китайскому, и откроет огромные возможности для экономического развития и других стран, в том числе и для России, которая богата природными ресурсами.
Это страна, где находятся глобальные природные ресурсы. Россия также сильная страна, имеет продвинутые развитые технологии. В Китае в этом плане пробел, который им нужно нагнать. И поэтому рост в Китае даст много дополнительных возможностей и для России тоже, чтобы расти вместе с Китаем. На этом я хотела бы завершить свое выступление. Спасибо большое за эту возможность, что дали мне поделиться моими наблюдениями. Спасибо вам большое. Это замечательная пища для размышлений.
Михаил,
Я хотел бы попросить, пригласить господина. Я хотел бы пригласить господина Юй сказать несколько слов. К сожалению, нашего координатора не слышно.
Нет, Андрей, нет, все слышно, просто у вас русский перевод стоит. Всем слышно, Андрей Невович? Okay, Mr. Yu, would you be so kind to say a couple of words about what you think about the recent developments in China? And by the way, from the point of view of a businessman, I would like to hear your opinion. Do you think that the overall crisis is over and we can say that we're back on track in terms of economy and economic development?
Professor Lin has given a very thorough analysis on the quantitative perspective of the Chinese economy and how it is related to the world. And I think he has given a very in-depth and thorough examination of that. My view on the 14th five-year plan are slightly different, which I want to quickly go through a few points. I think the focus of this five-year plan very much focused in three areas. One is technology and industrial development, which are basically innovation with special emphasis on technology and also advanced manufacturing. I'm sure a lot of the people are looking at the five-year plan on this basis. I saw a lot of the report given by American corporations, including a lot of consulting firms. Their focus is on this.
С консалтинговыми фирмами. Второй фокус пятилетнего плана, я думаю, многие это заметили, это развитие, распространение. Имеется в виду стратегическое изменение, стратегическое развитие, потому что в прошлом у Китая был один аспект развития, а теперь многие заметили, что наше многомиллиардное население не только работники и рабочие, они же также потребители. И мы представляем собой крупнейший потребительский рынок в мире. Вот что это означает. И третий фокус пятилетнего плана, мы должны посмотреть на него с другой точки зрения. Я сейчас хочу сказать о процветании, о развитии. Конечно, уделяется внимание политическим и социальным аспектам. Я согласен, что это важно. И также очень важно уделять внимание экономическим перспективам. Именно процветанию нашей страны. И я должен также сказать, что это очень уникальный пятилетний план, в отличие от предыдущих планов. Это уже 14-й план, он очень серьезно отличается от предыдущих 13. Пару лет назад было объявлено, что после текущего пятилетнего плана Китай вступит в новый период, который продлится примерно 30 лет, в течение которого Китай станет современной, сильной социалистической страной. И я думаю, что данный 14-пятилетний является периодом цели. Наша стратегия очень четко объясняет этот аспект. В этом году первый раз, когда коммунистическая страна, коммунистическая партия получила финансирование, и на 100 лет. Сейчас у нас второе столетие наступает в этом плане. И с 1949 года мы говорим о финансировании стабильной экономической структуры и промышленной инфраструктуры в Китае. В прошлом году у нас закончилось второй 40-летний этап. И мы сейчас начинаем следующий пятилетний план для развития процветания нашей страны. Вторая половина этого 40-летнего периода также состояла из нескольких пятилетних планов, которые закончатся в этом году. И за этот 40-летний период Китай достиг значительного благосостояния. Таким образом, в этом году у нас начало 30-летнего периода. который мы начинаем следующим пятилетним планом. Китайская коммунистическая партия поделила этот 30-летний период на два 15-летних периода, которые будут состоять из нескольких пятилетних планов. Вот таким образом мы разделяем нашу экономическую модель на несколько сегментов. И эта сегментация нам очень помогает. Все эти периоды различные. Первый 40-летний период и второй 40-летний период можно сравнивать по критическим элементам. Давайте, если мы посмотрим это более подробно, мы поймем это лучше. Что означает текущий пятилетний план? Линь очень подробно об этом рассказал, о качестве и о содержании этого пятилетнего плана и о наших целях к 2035 году. Но если мы посмотрим на текущий пятилетний план, я кратко подведу итог, скажу основную информацию. Здесь есть некоторые противоречия. Я думаю, российская экономика тоже их наблюдает. Первое. В реальной экономике и в виртуальной экономике китайское правительство за последние несколько лет подчеркивало, что экономика в Китае должна фокусироваться на реальной экономике. То есть развивать промышленный сектор и развивать промышленность, производство. Виртуальная экономика — это не просто СМИ, также и банковский сектор. Идея состоит в том, что виртуальная экономика должна обслуживать реальную экономику. Ну, в этом заключаются три цели этого пятилетнего плана. И аналитические работы, публикуемые на Западе, тоже подчеркивают это. Это первое, что мы должны отметить в пятилетнем плане. Второе — это связь между внутренней экономикой в стране и международной экономикой. Это второй аспект, который отвечает. Мой коллега только что сказал, что несколько недель назад проблемы китайской экономики еще недостаточно выявлены, и появятся еще проблемы в ближайшие несколько лет. Например, Tesla на 100% принадлежит американской компании, которая работает сейчас в Китае. Банки делают то же самое. Другие компании, многие другие компании тоже это делают и работают таким же образом в Китае. Хотя это американские компании. Это очень важная часть реформ нашего экономического плана. И то, как связана эта структура, это реформирование с остальной мировой экономикой, частью которой является Россия. И сейчас мы говорим об управлении этой экономикой, об управлении спросом и предложением. И третий аспект — это именно баланс между спросом и предложением. А третий аспект — это взаимоотношения между рынком и правительством. Отношения между рынком и правительством — это очень важный аспект политической повестки во многих странах и в Китае. Таким образом, вот эти четыре аспекта для нас очень важны. Нам надо их понять и понять то, как они повлияют на наш пятилетний план. Что касается экономического управления в Китае, мы должны отталкиваться именно от этих четырех аспектов. И подумать, как эти четыре аспекта связаны с реальным миром, с финансовым сектором, с промышленным, производственным сектором, сектором услуг и так далее. Я хотел бы упомянуть два аспекта в этой связи. Первое – это связь между этим мышлением и реальной экономикой. Технологии и инновации. Второе – развитие процветания. Технологии и инновации являются очень важными посредниками между этими четырьмя аспектами и реальным миром. Что думает правительство о экономике, о политическом управлении и что они думают об интересах людей? Если мы посмотрим на это внимательно, это очень важно для того, чтобы понять мышление китайского правительства. Давайте поговорим о количественной части этого анализа. Нам часто задают вопрос, восстановилась ли уже экономика в Китае, продолжает ли она расти, и на чем сфокусирован этот рост? Я отвечу, 2 года назад китайское правительство уже подчеркивало важность роста и подчеркивало важность того, что нужно поменять качество роста. Об этом докладывалось на конференции Центрального комитета. Также мой коллега 2 месяца назад говорил об этом на рабочей встрече по вопросам экономики в конце 2020 года. Задачи китайского правительства входит в то, что необходимо справиться с важными экономическими изменениями. И рост в Китае также следует адаптировать к требованиям нового мира. И именно это является важным. Об этом было сказано в этом отчете. И рост в стране должен соответствовать росту на душу населения. Это очень важно. Поэтому мы говорим не просто о количественном росте, нужно уделять внимание качественному росту в стране. А это значит росту доходов на душу населения в Китае. Рост инвестиций на исследование и разработку примерно 7% в год. Это определенная часть ВВП. Какая польза от этого Китаю? Рост инвестиций на НИО воздействует, влияет положительно на рост экономики, если часть затрат тратится на исследования. Сейчас Китай подчеркивает свои задачи роста. И когда проводится ежегодное планирование роста экономики, эти специалисты ставят перед собой определенные задачи. И не просто ставят какие-то цели, которые они обязаны достигнуть, они обязаны достигать этих целей с помощью управления экономикой и качественного роста. Например, к 2035 году Китай без проблем может в 2 раза увеличить свой экономический рост. Вот такие рекомендации были даны Центральному комитету. Но мы сейчас говорим о технологической части и развитии технологий в Китае. Они очень сильно развиваются в 3-4 областях. Прикладной науки, в экономическом секторе, в секторе производства. Мы наблюдаем серьезный рост во всех этих областях. Я не думаю, что мне нужно подробно на этом останавливаться, потому что вы все видели отчет, и его уже, наверное, прочитали. Основной смысл этого отчета — экономическая модель Китая способствует качественному росту. Это первое. Второе. Этот качественный рост поможет увеличить благосостояние и процветание Китая. За последний 40-летний период китайское правительство говорило о том, что некоторые люди будут богаче, чем другие люди. Но в последнее время китайское правительство меняет свой фокус и нацелено на процветание людей, на процветание Китая. И, конечно, ситуация с ковидом является препятствием. Многие думали, что она будет серьезным препятствием. Но на самом деле это не так, потому что ситуация с ковидом помогла нам усилить развитие фармацевтической области, в области медицины и дала определенный толчок этим областям. Поэтому я хотел бы объяснить.
And it has been an extremely interesting and thoughtful combined lecture. And of course, we all benefited a lot. I have 1.5 questions to you both. Obviously, you are both in different ways are optimistic. And we're happy with your optimism. But there is one problem which you have so far avoided or touched very lightly, and that is the fact that the model of growth in the world, is based on endless widening of consumption. And while people are talking about vertical economy, that it is cleaner, etc., we all know that vertical economy is consuming as much or as much energy or more than material economy, and that we are moving towards the situation where we are reaching the limits of growth. And of course, we all know that China is being criticized or called upon to cut consumption, whereas the Western economies are consuming obviously much more than developing economies, and are trying to push the responsibility on developing economies for carbon emissions. Of course, China has proclaimed its carbon free goal there over 30-40 years, but it is more or less along the same lines as we have been developing. I don't think we have, it might be that during this, not 40 years, but in the next several years, we have to propose to the world a different model of development. And I'm not calling on China on cutting consumption, because obviously your people deserve more, and you're working hard. But if we others will be developing along the lines of the modern capitalism, and that is endless and promoted consumption, we are all be moving towards the probably disaster in a decade or 2 decades. And there will be more and more limits on that. What is the thinking in China about this new ecological, if any, new ecological policy? I could call it new ecological policy. I could call it new climate policy. I think that climate is a misnomer, because climate is one of the, if there is, I mean, human imposed climate change, it's only one of the issues. But it is obvious that we are moving towards a comprehensive ecological crisis. What is the Chinese thinking on that matter? So far, in your brilliant presentations, you were concentrating most on growth. We are happy about that. But obviously, it should include a somewhat different thinking about growth.
Professor Lin, should you answer to the question posed by our Dean, Professor Karaganov, or maybe Chairman Yuy? But please switch on your, yes, your
Okay.
audio.
Well, thank you very much, Sergey, for this very nice question. I think Chairman Yuy already, answered part of that. For the Chinese government, we understand growth is the foundation to solve all the problems we encounter. But the growth should come with the quality. The growth should not focus only on the speed. And so for that reason, the President Xi is advocating the new development ideas. And in these new development ideas, there are 5 dimensions. The first one is innovation. We need to produce more, but more effectively with the same input. The second one is to have a coordination of the development. Reduce the gap between the advanced areas and lagging behind areas, the urban areas, and in the rural area, those kind of coordination. And the third one is green growth. We need to have a growth that is sustainable, both ecologically and environmentally. And the fourth one is open. We like the growth to be in a globalized world. And so the growth in China can provide the market for other countries, and certainly China will also count on the market of other countries, so we can have a win-win in the growth. And the last one, Chairman Yuy also mentioned, the growth, the development need to be shared by all the people. And so I think that Sergey, you mentioned the concern is very important, and that is included in the new thinking of development in China. We like to have a quality growth, and we understand when the people's income increase, they will pay increasingly more attention to the quality dimension of the development. And the government need to facilitate the realization of the common people's dream. Chairman Yuy may also have something to say.
Yes, Chairman Yuy, please. but don't forget to switch on the audio. Can you hear us, Chairman Yuy? Yes, but please switch on the microphone.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Now,
Yes.
now
Yes.
it's okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I think Professor Lin has just clearly answered that. One thing I think from my perspective, in the last few years, the emphasis in China on green development is almost everywhere. Okay. When I say everywhere, I really mean everywhere, because part of my job is a businessman, and all my business in terms of construction, in terms of my cinema operation, in terms of the cloud computing work that we are doing, the government has provided very stringent policy to ensure the reduction of emission or energy consumption. So I think the gentleman's question about the green development in China, I can tell you it has been so absolutely all over the place that you will be so surprised, okay, that in China, the emphasis on green development are really covering everywhere. I was having a meeting with one of the mayor in Shenzhen, one of the deputy mayor in Shenzhen yesterday in Shenzhen. And we were joking about some of the industrial facility that they are trying to set up. And then what they are telling me is this is the most important part of the review process of whether certain industry can migrate into Shenzhen. And if you look at the 5-year plan, if you look at the detail of the manufacturing sector, one of the most important sectors is rolling stock, okay, the train infrastructure. China will continue to be electrifying the entire transportation industry. So train, everybody knows about that in China already. Car is a very important part inside the 5-year plan, which is basically talking about electrifying the entire automobile industry.
Электрификация всей автомобильной отрасли является очень важной частью 5-летнего плана.
They are putting into the 5-year plan. You will see that part very easily. So I think to be very specific, the Chinese government is not only talking about green development, almost all the policy in the manufacturing sector, in the transportation and the services sector, they are doing that. I'll give you one more example. In the cinema that we are almost transforming all our lighting equipments into LED, okay? So our air conditioning system was fundamentally reformed in the last few years because of the government's green requirement, okay? So when we talk about that, and then and also in all the buildings that I'm building now in Shenzhen, in Guangzhou, in Nanjing, they are all under very stringent requirement of green, okay? So what I'm telling you is that from both a theoretical, political, economic aspect, green is a very important element in the 5-year plan. From my daily business as a businessman and also as a practitioner in economic study, that green is so critical that you don't have to worry about that. And almost all businessmen are fully aware of that. So I think that should help to explain to you the green word is so big in the Chinese business world. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Yu. And now we have another question from the chairman of our China seminar and head of the International Relations Department of our faculty, Professor Alexander Lukin. Alexander Vladimirovich, please.
I'm here. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to express my gratitude to both speakers because we frankly rarely have Chinese speakers now because for some reason recently people or experts from China are reluctant to speak, openly to us. It's an open event. We had several, but not too many. And that's very great. That's really great to listen to such top experts. And secondly, I have a question probably to both of you, but mostly to Professor Lin, who is for the first time here. Dr. Yuy has spoken to us already several times, and I must warn you that I'm not an economist, but an expert on international relations. So I give you an international relations question. The thing is that you very aptly compared the development and growth of China with several other countries, with fast-growing countries like Germany, South Korea, Japan, and others. But there is one, and you compared several factors, but there's one factor that you didn't mention at all, which is the agreeable international situation. The thing is that all those countries, and you can add several others, like Singapore, for example, Italy, post-war Italy, like Germany, and well, also Hong Kong and Taiwan. Also, they are not countries, but they're separate economies. They all enjoyed agreeable international situation. Their growth began at the time of Cold War, and for political reasons, the technologically advanced Western world was did not only want to contain their growth, but actually made every effort to support their growth. On the other hand, we don't have a single instance or example of a fast-growing country on the other side of the Cold War. Let's say, at least I don't know any example of that. So China, during the period of fast growth, was also kind of, we can say, well, at some point it was literally on the other side of the Soviet Union when it cooperated with the United States, like in the 1980s. But even then, it was not kind of, I mean, the technologically advanced countries did not want to contain it. Its development, it included it generally into the economic system, also not in the political system of this kind of advanced world, and let it enter the WTO, and actually helped it a lot with investment and so on. But in late Obama and especially Trump period, the situation changed. And the technologically advanced world wants to contain China. So shouldn't that factor be taken into consideration? China, if China continues its growth, is like you say, 6 or even 9%, it will need cooperation, international cooperation, even more than before. Because Chinese growth, to grow, China needs resources, lacks. It needs international markets, and it needs to use its workforce, at least partially abroad. I'm very happy that you mentioned Russia as a source of resources and even technology. But Russia is a huge country and has a lot of resources, of course, but it's only one country. And in terms of technology, it's advanced only in some areas, but not others, like military technology, for example. So it could not give China everything it needs. So my question is, in that very different international environment, what's going to happen? Shouldn't you take this factor into consideration as well? Thank you.
Very good and very sharp questions. And so also that be to be very open and frank. The first one, are we going to have a Cold War like the world encountered before 1980s? And I think unlikely. At that time, the world was divided into two camps. One, Soviet Union, the socialist camp. And the other one, the US, the capitalist camp. And the trade between these two camps was very small. And are we going to go back into those kind of Cold War? Very unlikely. Because now China is the largest trading partners of more than 120 countries in the world. China is the second largest trading partners for another about 70 countries. So more than 90% of the country in the world, China is either their largest trading partners or the second largest trading partners. That's one thing. And the second one, China now, measured by purchasing power parity, is already the largest economies in the world. China is the largest trading nation in the world. And for people to understand trade, certainly it's a win-win for all the trading partners. But the small country will benefit more than the largest country. So that means what? Other trading countries with China, they gain more than China when they have the trade with China. And also, if they want to decouple from China into China is in one camp, and they are in the other camp, they have to lose much more than China. But we know every country, they concern their own benefit. The reason why US is willing to give up its economic gain to contain China, because the US want to maintain its position as a hegemon in the world, as the, as a superpower in the world. But other than that, no country has that ambition, right? Germany does not have the ambition to be the #1 hegemon in the world. France does not have that. Japan does not have that. UK does not have that. And under the kind of situation, are they willing to give up their growth, their job, their increase in the people's income for the sake of the US to maintain its superpower position in the world? Actually not. And so that's the reason why Chancellor Merkel continuously said, we don't want to choose sides between the US and China. We want to be friends to everyone. And I think that position is shared, I think, almost every country in the world. So under the kind of situation, that's the reason why when I talk about the Chinese growth potential, I say China should have the growth potential of 8%. But if there's some decoupling, the only country who will be real, be true to decouple from China is the US. But we know other countries, no reason why they want to decouple from China. And so for that reason, I think, yes, international relation will be something China has to pay attention to. But as long as China maintains stability and growth, at the same time, like Chairman Yuy mentioned, that China continue to open its economy, I don't think the U.S. intention to create the Cold War and to push China into the one camp and the U.S. in the other camp. I think that kind of plot cannot be successful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lin. Thank you very much. Before opening the floor to the questions from the audience, and we have quite a lot of them, I would like to ask my own questions that bothers me as a representative of a Russian bank and an organization that is officially responsible for promoting Russian exports, including to China. Recently, it seems to me from my observations that China is basing its policy on the drive to become self-sufficient. And if we look through the recent 5 years plan, then we'll see that this self-sufficiency is one of the major goals of the Chinese government. And in this regard, it seems that even in these spheres where Russian and Chinese cooperation is very active right now, for example, in hydrocarbons trade, resource trade, agriculture trade, it seems that in the upcoming years, as China will become more and more self-sufficient, this trade will probably become less complicated and may even deteriorate. And in this regard, my question to Mr. Lin is, whether do you think it is a place in Chinese strategy of building self-sufficient state for trade with foreign countries, especially definitely with Russia, because Russia is our homeland and we're interested in development of bilateral relations?
Good question. I think that as I mentioned, the best way to maintain China's security, especially in the competition with the US, is to maintain the Chinese market to be open. Because that's the best way to avoid that the US intention to isolate China. So there's no intention at all. As you know, China recently signed the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, with the ASEAN and Japan, Korea, Australia. China also reached agreement with the European Union about the investment treaty. China already showed the intention to participate in comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Arrangement. And so there's no at all any policy in China to be self-sufficient. There's only one area, certainly security. And especially that area may be hijacked by the US. Just like, the Huawei case, it's the #1 mobile phone producer in the world, but US cut all the supply to the companies. And certainly the company will continue to grow, then the company will have to produce all the necessary part by ourselves. Other than that, I don't think that China will go back to the pattern of self-sufficiency. China will continue to open up the economy and to be partners of other countries so we can grow together.
Okay, Mr. Lin, thank you. Mr. Yu, what do you think about the future of Russian-Chinese cooperation? As far as I remember, last year or a couple of years when I made an interview with you, you were very interested in this topic. So I think you have some thoughts on that.
I strongly agree with what Professor Lin just said. I think the Chinese economy is not only going to expand its footprint all over the world. Its emphasis on dual circulation, especially the domestic market, is trying to increase significantly the amount of import they could have. I mean, there's no possibility that China could be self-sufficient in such a way, in an isolationist way. I think self-sufficient is more a national security issue than a development issue. I think in this 5-year plan, the government very much emphasized on the balancing between security and development. And experience in the last few years inspired the Chinese government, the leadership, that we should work towards a stronger innovation-driven, technology-driven economy, and to fill up, to patch up some of the weaknesses of the supply chain or the value chain in China, which actually Professor Lin is one of the strongest proponents in the past to patch up some of this, I would call it the weak link inside the supply chain. So I think the microprocessor is one area. Other than that, there's also certain area in technology the Chinese government are doing, but this is more national security. In terms of improving the development model, opening up is a very critical part. I think Professor Lin has rightly said that China and Russia are very complementary in terms of its economy. Not only resources, I think the manufacturing part, the technology part especially. I think China and Russia are pretty complementary also on that. So I personally find China and Russia, I'm very supportive, a strong China and Russia economic tied up. And then to actually identify area that each side are strong at and each side are weak at, and do certain targeted cooperation planning so that both sides could fill up. I think when I met you last time, I was saying that Russia can provide at least 2 Australia to China, And then the 2 Australia to China are not just purely on resources, but also in technology part, I'm sure you know today mining or resources are not just digging it up. There's so much mining production required. I think China and Russia can do a lot in this area. It is much more ecological, it's much more economical, and then it's both complementary to both countries. And Russia, I mean, why you want to let the minerals and all these materials lay underground? You have, highly productive land that China are so dependent on. So there's a lot of things the 2 sides can do. So I strongly agree with what Professor Lin is just saying, that it is very important that 2 countries should work very closely and making sure the 2 sides can, complement each other on the relative strengths and weaknesses of the 2 countries. So I don't see that as a problem at all. I see that as a national strategy of China to work closely with Russia, but must be careful. These 2 economies are very different. So when you are complementary, it also means you are different. So when you're different, you need a little bit of time and good method to patch up the difference so that the complementary part will not becoming a different conflicting part, but becoming truly complementary and work in the mutual benefit too. I honestly think we still have some problem in this area. I've been visiting Russia in the last 2-3 years. And the reason I want to visit it, because I have no business there. And then last time when you talked to me, I was saying that near Vladivostok, you were talking about some possibility there. I asked my staff to do some study. I said, yeah, it seems clearly there's some possibility. But I think there's still some, how would I call it, business culture that are not very comfortable with each other in terms of language, in terms of business practices. And we have to overcome that. And because I saw in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Thailand, the conflict between China and them 20, 30 years ago, okay, was very, very difficult at that time, okay? Now, no problem at all, okay? So I honestly think we have to work on that, not just on one deal, two deal, but really between the two governments to structure something so that we can understand each other better. Because one of the questions you raised in your list is that why is the Chinese government bringing all the workers, all the machinery, all that to Russia in terms of investment? It was like that about 20-something years ago in Middle East, when the Chinese company going there to do the construction, they bring workers, okay? They bring a lot of engineers there. But I talked to the China Railway Construction Group recently, okay? They were saying that, no, they're not bringing too many people now. Okay, they are using local African and Middle East workers already. So I think maybe there's some methodology we have to adapt to, so that I think the two countries can work much closer in this aspect.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yu. We are working for already 1.5 hours, and I think we'll go with like a couple of more questions from the audience and then can wrap up. And first, I would like to ask Mr. Marek Dabrowski, who raised his hand a long time ago. Mr. Dabrowski, please, you can ask your question. Switch on the mic. У вас микрофон не включен. Включите микрофон. Это нижний левый.
Okay, вот okay. No, I know, but I was not allowed unmute. My name is Marek Dąbrowski. I'm professor of Higher School of Economics and research fellow in Bruegel, Brussels. Thank you, Professor Lin, for excellent presentation. Basically, I have a question, perhaps some doubt regarding your growth projection, especially your point that you think that China can grow by 8–9% annually up to 2035. I have serious doubt here simply because of the demographic constraints, shrinking working age population, which already started. You mentioned this problem, but I still think that you underestimate the importance of this factor. I realize that China has some room of reallocation labor force from agriculture, other labor-intensive sectors to higher productivity sectors, but there are limits of this. So I would say that for the next 5–7 years, perhaps this is realistic, continue high rate growth, but then will be definitely, I think, limits. And basically, I think this kind of I would say, underestimating of this demographic barrier is common to many economies, because, for example, 30 years of discussion about Japanese lost growth actually very rarely refers to demographic. Is a lot of discussion on monetary fiscal policy. It's the same as now in Europe. Also in Russia, basically, I think that not so many economists understand that Russian economy cannot grow at the rate it grew 15 years ago, simply because of different demographic. You would have to have productivity growth of the range of 10% per year to materialize your I would say scenario, which I think that we don't have historical examples, evidence for such rapid productivity growth. I agree with you on potential benefits of latecomers, but this has, I think, importance for growth per capita growth. Here, China, of course, has a lot of perspective to catch up with high-income countries, but not, I would say, total GDP. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Marek, for these questions. And let me mention first, I say growth potential. I do not mean China will grow 9% per year for the coming 16 years. But I say there's a potential there. That's one thing. And then secondly, the aging issue. You are right. When other countries, they're aging, in general, their growth dropped down to 2% or even less. But remember, those countries are aging, they are high-income countries. Like Japan, they are already on the global technological frontiers. And under the kind of situation, we know that for the high-income country, the average growth rate of their economy on the average was 3% to 3.5%. But on the average high-income country growth, the population growth rate was about 1%. And so when your growth potential is 3% to 3.5%, and your aging population growth rate is 0, certainly you will drop down to about 2%, right? But China is still a middle-income country, still on the catching up process. And under this kind of situation, how large of the aging will affect the growth? I would say much smaller, because for the high-income country facing aging, their growth potential is around 3%. But China's growth potential is 9%, right? That's one thing. And then secondly, aging will affect the labor supply quantitatively. And when I talk about growth potential, I compare Germany at the stage of China, its population growth rate was 0.8%. Japan at this stage, its population growth rate is 1%. South Korea at this stage, its population growth rate is 0.9%. And China's population growth rate today is 0.3%. Likely it may drop down to 0% by the time of 2030, 2035. And for that, I already cut down 1 percentage point of the growth potential. So I say, if you look into other countries, the growth potential can be 9%, but I think likely will be growth potential 8%. And how come I think growth potential can be 8%? Even we have the aging issue, because aging affects the quantity of labor supply, but China has an extremely early retirement age currently. For the male workers, its retirement age is 60 years old. For female, its a retirement is 55 years old. And to compensate for the quantitative part of the labor supply issue, China can extend the retirement age to overcome that. But more importantly is quality of the labor force. So China can increase the education of the workers. Currently, the average education of the workers in China is around, it's less than 10 years old. But for the younger generation, the education can be 12 years old or even 16 years old. And so to use the quantity of the young workers to compensate for the quantity part. But also, when China is a middle-income country, there's a potential for industrial aggregating. Because when we talk about population density, we often talk about the allocation of the labor force from the agriculture to the manufacturing sectors in those kind of two-sector economies. But in reality, the manufacturing sector has many manufacturing industry have many sectors, right? So if you reallocate the labor force from low productivity agriculture to manufacturing, certainly you have some dividend. But you reallocate labor force from lower value added manufacturing to higher value added manufacturing. There's some dividend there also. And potential for that is still very large. So for that reason, I do not worry so much about the impact of aging on the growth potential in China. But I say growth potential, but because we want to have a quality growth, so we don't have to only pursue the speed of growth. We can have a larger room to pursue the green growth. We have a larger room to, narrowing the regional income gap and so on. So by that, I say we have 8% growth potential, but we have sufficient room to realize around 6% growth in the coming 15 years.
Mr. Lin, thank you very much. And we have like a group of small questions from the chat. The first one is probably to Mr. Yu. Also, I'm not sure about that. Correct me if I'm wrong. About the Alibaba Group, people are interested in the situation with this company and how the situation with this company correlates with the overall policy of China concerning the support of e-commerce of different things. Because as we know, Alibaba Group is now being dismantled by the Chinese authorities. It was forbidden to conduct an IPO, and many people perceive it as the pressure of Chinese authorities on the Alibaba and on private business in China in general. Could you please clarify from the business perspective, is that so, and how does this situation correlate with overall plans of development?
I've been answering this question at least 10 times in the last few months. So I can tell you I know a little bit of that. Okay? And I can tell you all this word that you were saying about dismantling, about restricting the IPO, I have to say these are not correct at all. Okay. And first of all, it is not just Alibaba or the Ant Financial Group that's under this situation. Actually, the last 24 hours, Jingdong's Financial are also doing something to restructure. Okay. So I think you must understand actually the earlier question to Justin about the aging and the growth potential and all that. Now, we must sit back and reflect upon one observation, which is in the last 40 years, I think the Chinese economy are giving the world a lot of surprises. Okay. Now, why these surprises? I think it's because what is surprises? Something that you're not familiar with, and it happened. The COVID is a surprise. And then the growth rate of China is a surprise. And China become the powerhouse for manufacturing is a surprise. Okay, it's a surprise because we're not familiar with it. So the question you're asking about Alibaba, or the question about aging population, and then how could an aging population has a growth potential of 9%? I think we need to see, just like what Justin was saying, there's a lot of other factors people are not looking at. In the case of Alibaba, there's a lot of things not looking at. Now, what happened is to the world in observing the Alibaba case or the Ant Financial case is that they don't understand the Chinese government, when they allow Alibaba going into the financial services sector, okay, there was no regulation at all in terms of how to treat a company like that. When e-commerce was developed, and then I was involved in e-commerce, and then at that time, no way people can pay money, because in China, there's not even credit card at that time. When like 2004, when the Taobao was happening, there's some more e-commerce going on, there was no payment system. So Alibaba was forced into a situation to do the payment. But at that time, there's no regulation, no license for it. But the Chinese government has a very liberal policy, so that they let you do it until the moment you break the rule. But there's no rule. So 5 years later, 10 years later, the Chinese government start proposing certain rules. Those rules are now also outdated because the size of Alibaba's financial services are so big. It is even bigger than most of the banks in China, okay? But because of that, they were concerned. So the rules related to microfinance, payment system, investment fund management through Alibaba's infrastructure were being studied in the last 4 or 5 years in depth. So finally, when Alibaba's subsidiary Ant Financial went into an IPO mode, there was a lot of argument within the government system. How should we treat that company? How are we going to manage the risk, the leverage ratio of that, or the gearing ratio, which the competitor to Ant Financial, the banks, are subject to some gearing ratio, some reserve ratio, which Alibaba or Ant Financial are not subject to. So the Alibaba group or the Ant Financial group try to rush the IPO so that they can make a big money on that. But then the government was saying that, come on, you still have not addressed the gearing ratio, the financial risk ratio, the dissemination of risk factor, okay? So at the end of the day, the government decided, hold on, okay? Don't do that. If you do that, after you have the IPO, when we impose new regulation on it, your stock market is going to crash. When you crash, it will pull the entire market, okay? So because of that, the Chinese government decided they will not risk such thing. So they call off the IPO. Now, my understanding is that the government are working with Ant Financial and also Ali Group, also Tencent, also Baidu, also the others like Jingdong and all that. They are all, when all these internet companies, they have financial services subsidiary, they are now forming what they call a financial holding group, which are subject to banking regulation and risk management. These are the situation. So I think when this is done, my thinking is that Ant Financial will go to the IPO again, I think maybe within a year, okay? And some people are suggesting maybe even 6 to 9 months, they will go back to the market again. Now on Ali, I think the growth of the microfinancing and the internet financial services are very similar to the situation of social media and also related to e-commerce. Now, Alibaba dominated e-commerce business in China extensively. And what they are doing, they're also having a lot of monopolistic practice, which are usually associated in an early stage of certain industrial development. Now, what they are doing is that they want Alibaba to follow certain anti-monopoly rule. I don't think they are going to dismantle Alibaba Group at all. I think they're just asking, they're opening up, for example, the e-commerce platform for Alibaba, Taobao and Tmall, they only use Alipay, okay? Now they will be asked to use Tencent Pay. They will ask to use Huawei Pay. They will ask to use Jingdong Pay. All payment should be adopted, okay? So now I think these are the situation. I honestly don't think there is any way to attack the so-called private enterprise at all. But they are purely, basically financial risk management, which the Chinese government are very, very particular about that. They actually are very strong-handed in making sure financial risks are not disseminated in an irregular manner. I think these are the main issue. So I hope I can dispel the wrong perception of that.
Mr. Yu, thank you very much. That's actually what I was telling my friends recently, but nobody believed me. So I'm very glad you said. I'm very glad you said that. Maybe they will believe you. Okay, and actually, I see a lot of very good questions, but I see that every next question is bigger than the previous one. So I think we should stop here because we can do like that all day. And I'm very thankful to our distinguished speakers for energizing such an interesting conference that people want to participate. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. And with this, I would like to ask my colleague Andrei Niyazovich Korneev to wrap up the conference.
Let me once again sincerely thank our distinguished guests, Professor Lynn Ifu and Chairman Yuy Pinьхай, for their presentations and answering questions. Some of the questions were rather sharp, and thank you for giving a detailed and thorough answer. We did not answer all the questions, but we will send you the remaining questions for maybe so that you could understand what is our audience interested in. And let me also say that with this prospect of probably COVID pandemics coming to a halt or to the end sometime in the future, we will hope that we will have a chance of meeting, of welcoming you in person in Russia, in the High School of Economics and in the VEB Bank. And I think, and I hope that it will be not in the far future, but probably in some near future. And let me thank all the audience for listening and for presenting questions. I think that we had a very good session, but of course, as every session, we could not discuss all the problems, but we see that the Russian audience is very much interested in the future strategy in the 14th year plan period in China. Thank you all once again. And this brings us to the end of this session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone, and special thanks to our guests.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye to everybody.
Yep.
Bye.